Hey guys, I'm Nazir and we are back in Wonderdraft with part 4 of our fantasy map making series. Today we're going to focus pretty much exclusively on that area of the Duan, which is a sort of East Asian inspired area. So let's just jump right in. My vision for this region as a whole, the Duan, is a fertile area, abundant in natural resources, plenty of water, and you'll see that I'm going to spend the first portion of the video filling in all these rivers. As you'll have seen before, I start my rivers in the mountain ranges. They move downhill, they merge, sometimes they combine into a lake on the way, and eventually meet the sea. Now what I'd like as well, which you can see me starting to fill in here, is some very, very big, wide rivers which cut right through the centre of the country, and they should be broadly quite gentle, so lacking waterfalls and any other obstacles that would prevent the movement of commodities by boat, essentially. So wide, calm rivers that cross-cut through the land. Now that I'm happy with where the major rivers are going to be, I'm just going to fill in at some of the hills. Some places where I'm putting ranges of these hills, it's sort of to make that logical split. So where you see rivers, for example, going in two different directions, you might ask yourself, why? Why don't these two separate river systems merge? And you can put some hills between them to sort of indicate that there is raised land which justifies those rivers going in different directions. Similarly, between some of these lakes, because of the way the water is flowing down, clearly some of these lakes need to look like they're on a higher elevation than some of the others, and their hills can help us do that. I'm breaking my main rule for river placement here, because you'll notice this river actually splits rather than merges. You do see this here and there, but they're quite rare on Earth in the real world. Some good examples of this, really, if you look at the Nile, as it reaches the sea, it splits into this delta, which gives you a lot of fertile land as there are regular floods, and it puts sort of nutrients back into the soil. And I don't think I've got a delta on this map yet, so I want to just get at least one in. And the Duan, because it's quite a large, relatively flat area near the coast, it made sense to add one in here. This next section of the video is pretty much just trees, lots and lots of trees, a lot of clicking. I do go to the tree brush here and there where there are big areas, but the issue I have with the brush tool for placing the trees is that it overlaps the water sometimes. It'll sort of, you know, cut the trees into the rivers. So most of this is individual clicks or dragging lines of trees. And as we've seen in other regions as well that we've already fleshed out, pine trees for higher altitude and then switch to the oak trees for lower altitude. And just as the placement of the mountain does as well then, the colouring of trees when you zoom out and look at the area as a whole, it helps to tell us where the high areas are and where the lowlands are. And even though I see the Duan as a highly populated, sort of modern, civilized nation, I still want there to be some wilderness. You know, I still want some deep forests, I still want some hidden valleys. There still needs to be some mystery in the land. And I think that should be mostly towards the west. I imagine most of the cities and most of civilization to be along the three biggest rivers, and then along the coast. So many trees needed for this area. Every time I zoom out, I'm just reminded of how much work there is left to do. And I won't tell you how long this actually took in real time, but I had to make several stops to just to stretch my hand from all that clicking. Start to place down some of those grassy textures as well, mostly around the delta, and then other areas where I think there would be farmland, really, farmland and grasslands. In terms of lore and culture and history for this area, I see society split into two castes. So as I've mentioned before, we're going to be playing this campaign in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So I see the ruling caste predominantly as sorcerers, this sort of noble class of sorcerers that have kept their sorceress bloodlines through, you know, inbreeding and arranged marriages and things like that. And then you'd have a working class who are generally mundane, non-magical, who do all the manual labour, you know, predominantly farmers. As I fill this section in as well, I'm leaving that sort of strip up the middle where the forest is quite sparse and you've got a lot of grassland. I see that as the result of human activity, you know, where people there have cut the trees down, so they've got a clearer route. Then maybe there'll be some settlements there as well from that area of those big rivers down to the sort of large estuary area to the south. And that estuary area that sort of looks like a crow's foot, that's probably where this nation would have most of their shipyards, because it's a sort of naturally protected area and still close to the coast, and I suppose close to forests as well, so for a ready source of lumber to build their ships. This is where I finally give in and start to use the brush for some of the larger areas, but you'll see here and there I do have to go back in and finesse just to move the odd individual asset here and there where it's overlapped with the river. And the brush works fine, there's nothing wrong with using the brush for these large open areas. I just usually prefer to have a more sort of specific placement for where I want my trees to go. But again, we are dealing with such a big country. I mean, that's the reason I started with Duan, really, for this level of detail on the continent. It's just so big, and it'll be nice to get out of the way. You could almost imagine playing an entire D&D campaign just in this country. suppose one thing I would like in Wonderdraft, and something I know you can do, you can add in your own custom assets, is a bit more variety on the trees of this style, because like I've said before, I only really use that pine and that oak tree and that little sort of grass tuft asset in terms of vegetation, but I feel like it could benefit from a bit more variety. Something I'll probably look at myself in the future, perhaps draw a couple of my own and add those in. But I think for now, that two-tone does the job. I do want to get those really thick, dense woods as well. You'll notice me playing around with the density setting on the toolbar. Normally I leave that on default, but where you do want something that looks really thick and wild, I put that density right up. Finally done. Now I just need to thicken that mountain barrier that separates the Duan from the neighbouring countries. And then just a little bit of colouring to finish off once I'm happy with the mountain placement. And whilst I'm here, I'm just going to finish off the opposite end of that mountain range as well with hill placement, because I know I'm going to have to get around to that eventually anyway. So with the colouring, there's not a lot to do for this area. I don't see there being many snowy regions in the Duan, so it's just using the green, focusing mainly on the river valleys and the areas around the lakes. Now I should say as well, colouring is completely optional in Wonderdraft. If you want more of that, you know, sort of stained paper look, you can leave it in the default yellowy colour, and a lot of maps look absolutely fine just like that. As before then, just using that brown to tint some of the hills, and then back with the green to blend it in. And then the same as we used before, grey on the mountains. with a couple of whiter mountains here and there just to indicate elevation. So there we go, the Duan, pretty much finished. As with most of the other areas you've seen me look at so far, it's still missing settlement names, place names, river names, that kind of stuff. But I feel like that's something I need to do at the very, very end. So hope you've enjoyed this one. See you next time.